Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Behind me, in a moment, you will hear the sounds coming out from the sanctuary, where the Valley Forge Chorale is holding their dress rehearsal for their Sunday afternoon concert, which will be held here at 2 in the afternoon. Go to their website and you'll find all the details there. Churches, this one included, are one of the central places where the arts are nourished and appreciated, not only for their entertainment value, but also for what they do for the human spirit, and even beyond that, as a means of connecting with God Himself. That's a big claim, I know, but it's one that I would be willing to defend. Hear that? Also, let me mention that this coming Friday, we'll be hosting ourselves another concert, which will be back in Fellowship Hall for the Gardyn, Gardyn, Jazz Orchestra. The one for Valley Forge is their fundraiser. You'll need tickets, again, from their website to be part of that. The one that we're hosting, it's free will offering. Come and simply enjoy it. And that will be on Friday at 7 o'clock in Fellowship Hall. Or even better, join us every Sunday when we ourselves make music for the Lord. Not for an audience of people, but for the most discerning and most appreciative audience that there is. The one who invented music himself. There's a sermon in that. But for now, well, let's get ready and hear some more music that will be part of our worship today. Today we hear John chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. And then in the course of the sermon, we'll hear the rest of the ending of John's Gospel. But this is where we'll begin. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We'll go with you." They went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he'd taken it off, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." When something awful, or maybe something wonderful, let's just say something momentous, happens in somebody's life, it's often followed by a time where they're really looking for, let's call it normalcy, for things to even out one way or another. You just want things at some point to slow down, to be a little bit predictable for at least a little while. Big changes. Big changes are exhausting. And important events demand a lot of attention, and it takes time and energy to begin to make sense out of them and figure out what to do with whatever the new situation is. And you just want things to settle down for a little while. Sometimes you just want to have an afternoon to sit down on the couch and watch a baseball game with a bag of potato chips next to you. Sometimes you want to go take a walk in the park, turn off your phone. Sometimes a nap. You need that period, whether depending on what's happening, whether it's a few minutes or an afternoon or a day or a week. For some people, it can be a lot longer. And of course, it depends on what has happened as well. There's always that time where you have to sort things out. And Emily Dickinson describes describes it this way. She says, after great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious, like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore, and yesterday or centuries before? The feet, mechanical, go round, a wooden way of ground or air or aught, regardless grown. A quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered, if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow. First chill, then stupor, and then the letting go. I wonder whether there might have been a bit of that going on for Peter following the resurrection of Jesus. Peter had been through all the events of Jesus last week in Jerusalem. He'd been right there with him. And it was not just that he was a spectator watching what was happening. He was right there in the midst of it. When they came to arrest Jesus, he had a knife that he drew out and he ran to protect Jesus and sliced off somebody's ear to defend him. That's not a spectator. And it put him in danger. And yes, Jesus was carried off, and Peter escaped at that moment, but he went and he was outside in the courtyard of the house where Jesus was being put on trial. And as he was trying to figure out and find out what was going on, somebody asked him whether he was with Jesus. He had been spotted. He had been recognized. His accent was part of what gave him away. And there he was in the courtyard of the high priest, whose slave's ear he had cut off. He denied knowing Jesus, not just once, but 3 times. And boy, did that slice him to his own core. He ran. And he ended up hiding in a room with a locked door with his friends, the other disciples, in front of whom he had been bragging that no matter what, he would follow Jesus to the very end. But they knew. They knew he had said he didn't even know him. They had their own problems. They had their own things going on. But when push came to shove, Peter found out a lot about himself at the same time as he lost Jesus. And who knows what part of it made him despair the most. Then came the news from the women that Jesus' body was not in the tomb where it had been left. And the news that he had risen. And Peter, along with John, ran to the tomb to figure out what was going on. Were these women crazy? Or was it something else? They saw for themselves. The body wasn't there. And then they returned to the locked room. Please, 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 no more surprises. But wait, It turns out this was not just some sort of ghoulish desecration of a corpse. It was what Jesus had said. Jesus had told Peter he would deny him 3 times, and he had said he would rise from the dead. Peter found out on his own about the denial. And here, inside the locked room, all of a sudden, Jesus himself was right there. Peace be with you, he said, and showed them his wounds. How do you wrap your head around that? How do you make sense of it? That Jesus has suddenly started showing up whenever the disciples now are getting together, because it happened again a week later, and Thomas, who had not been there the first time, was there the second time to see it. And word came in from other places that other people had seen him and talked with him, that he had broken bread with them. But Peter knew he was dead. Was dead. Now what? How do you make sense of it? It's not going to happen overnight. Please, 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 no more surprises, not even good ones. Normalcy. Can't things settle down for a day, a week, a month, a year, the rest of my life? I want to go back. I want my life back. And Peter made his way home again. Oh, not home to Jerusalem in the locked room, home to the Sea of Galilee, home to the fishing villages where he had first heard Jesus say, "Come, follow me." 3 years. 3 years earlier. And it wasn't just him. The people who had left those fishing villages, they traveled with him back to what they knew. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing. I'm going to go do what we do. I'm going back to life. What are we supposed to do now? I'm a fisherman. I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "We'll go with you." And then, just to top it all off, as things were getting back to normal, as they were back in their hometown, as they were fishing again, as they were doing things that they understood, as things were normal as going fishing and not catching anything, Jesus shows up again. You know, there's a normal before Jesus, which was what Peter was thinking about, maybe hoping for, maybe assuming. But what he had on his hands, and the other disciples too, was a new normal, a normal after meeting Jesus, which is not normal any longer by those other standards. Think about the things that had happened, things that Peter had experienced with Jesus around. even just things that had to do with fish and boats. There's a lot of them that are recorded in the Gospels. The Gospel of John doesn't record it, but the other three do. How it was there on the Sea of Galilee where there had been a storm that had come up suddenly and threatened to overturn a boat that they were all in, including Jesus, asleep in the front of the boat. And they woke Jesus up. They said, "Do you not care that we're about to drown?" And he looked, he saw the storm, and he said, "Knock it off. Peace, be still." And the weather became calm. And they just sailed on. John tells a story that may have gone back to the same incident. His version says that the disciples were in a boat facing heavy weather, having left Jesus back on shore. They were going across the Sea of Galilee. They had traveled maybe about 4 miles when a storm came up a little bit. And they looked out as they were watching and trying to sort of figure out what was going on with the waves. And off in the distance, they saw Jesus coming toward them across the water, walking straight toward them. And, says John, they were terrified. But Jesus said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." They wanted to take him into the boat. And immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. That's weird. That's not normal. And John places it right after another event. After the only miracle that's found in all 4 Gospels, the one where Jesus takes 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and feeds thousands of people with just that. Matthew tells another story, one that I kind of like, about how someone came to them and went to Peter and said, "It's time to pay your taxes." And Peter went to Jesus and said, "We've got to pay the taxes for our little group here, but we need the money." And Jesus says, "Tell you what, you go catch a fish. And when you catch the fish, there's going to be a coin in its mouth. Use that to pay the taxes." So Peter goes, he goes fishing, he finds a coin, and he pays the taxes. And everything goes right along. None of these things would be normal, except for the fact that Jesus is in the picture, which makes it normal for strange things to happen. Now, with Peter thinking that after the resurrection, life will be business as usual again, somebody shows up on the shoreline and shouts to the fishermen to tell them that after working all night with absolutely nothing to show for it, all they have to do is cast their net on the other side of the boat, and they'll have plenty of fish. John recognizes what's going on, and he says to Peter, "Guess who that is?" And "It is the Lord," he says. Peter seems to have realized at some point in all of this that there's not going to be any going back. The new normal is not going to be the pre-Jesus normal, but the life with Jesus normal that had begun to take shape before the resurrection and is now continuing for all of them, one way or another. For Peter, it meant another change in his life, one where he would have to come face to face with the Jesus whom he had betrayed. And he would have to come face to face with his own self. For Peter, it meant a new normal that is there for all of us in this post-resurrection, Jesus-filled life. That is to say that even when we had illusions about ourselves, even when we lose those illusions, we find out that we're loved anyway. And we're called anyway. And that isn't so much about us as it is about Jesus. And that's hard for a lot of people to comprehend. That is not normal. Normal is to think about yourself. Normal is to put yourself at the center of every story, of the way you think, of your understanding, of all of that. When instead, it's about Jesus. And Jesus doesn't care so much about his followers being good enough. What he cares about is the love that's in their hearts, and that they will receive the love in his heart for them that changes things from the old normal to the Jesus normal. From the normal where you just go about your business to the normal where his love is your business. For Peter, that lesson would begin to sink in on shore again after breakfast, with that exceedingly awkward, bluntly honest, but incredibly grace-filled discussion, interaction between Jesus and him. A one-on-one reminder of what had gone before. You deny me 3 times? Let me ask you 3 times. Do you love me or not? Jesus knows how to get through to us. And with Peter, it worked. And he did pick up on what Jesus said every time, which is that the new life, the new normal, would involve feeding Jesus' lambs, his sheep. It would, as he went on to describe things that would happen to Peter later in his own life, it would involve following Jesus in exactly the way and exactly the path that he had feared in that courtyard, to come into conflict with the people who had killed Jesus. But to follow him was not just to follow him to the tomb, but to life beyond. John's gospel doesn't wrap up any loose threads in this story. It leaves everything sort of open-ended. None of the Gospels really just close everything up and say, the end, and they all lived happily ever after. Far from it. Each, though, in its own way, shows Jesus telling his friends to keep on going, that there's a life waiting there for them, and that the world needs them because the world needs Jesus. Each of the Gospels finishes up in its own way, saying that the story of Jesus continues and goes on because Jesus doesn't come to an end. And his life among us doesn't come to an end. That even when he ascends to heaven, his spirit still is with us, and his presence is among us to the ends of the earth. So the way John does finish his gospel is by saying this. There are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose the world could not contain all the books that would be written. So go out and let him help you write one of those tales, because it's a great story.